Hello. I just finished reading this book, Core Christianity, Finding Yourself in God's Story. It's written by Michael Horton. I just finished reading this book and I thought I'd take a moment and let you know a little bit about the book and what I thought of it. Michael Horton, the author, is a very famous theologian. He has wrote over 30 books, and most of his books do dive deep into theology. And so this book takes a lot of what he writes about, and he writes in depth about, and he takes it and gives you a brief overview of the entire Bible and introduces you to theological terms that maybe you didn't know, but if you go to start studying theology more, you'll run across these terms over and over again. On the back of the book, next to the price, it's $14.99, but next to the price you will see above it, it says where the publisher recommends this being put in a bookstore. And it does say Christian theology. Again, that does not surprise me, as Michael Horton is the author, and it does deal with theological terms. However, if I was to place this book, I would recommend it in a Christian living section, or if the bookstore had a new believers section, I would recommend putting it there. The main idea of this book is Michael Horton does a good job of taking what every Christian agrees on and putting it in this book. So you're going to read about the Trinity. You're going to read about the inspiration of Scripture and why reading the Bible is so important, as that is where God is talking to us today from. And he does a good job, like I said, of introducing you to theological terms that maybe if you're a new believer, or maybe you haven't done any in-depth study in theology, you wouldn't necessarily understand, such as hypostatic union or justification, sanctification, eschatology. These are all terms that Michael Horton goes into more detail to try to just explain. As you can see, as you're reading along, you will come to a magnifying glass every now and then, and it will have one of these theological terms. For instance, this one is hypostatic union. And then he goes down and he gives a little definition of what that actually is. And so by doing it this way, it makes this book very unintimidating. Anyone could pick up this book. It is very easy to read. It is probably written, I would honestly guess, on a 6th grade reading level. I would not worry about handing this to somebody in fear that they're not going to be able to understand it. He did a very good job of making all of this material accessible to anybody. Another thing I really liked about this book is he puts scripture references for everything he's talking about, and it is not uncommon to come to a page that will have 7, 8, 9 different scripture references for what he's talking about. This is wonderful for a new believer or somebody just starting to study theology, as it gives them where to go to for what he has said. Okay, Michael, you told me this, but where did you find it? Michael goes ahead and gives you that answer by giving you those scripture references. One of the things he does not do that I maybe would have thought important is if he comes to an idea that there is debate over in the theology world, he doesn't usually give the other options. Specifically at the end of the book, when he's talking about end times, and he comes to the 1,000 years that's mentioned in Revelation, he gives his viewpoint of that and his scripture references to back it up. But there is so much debate on what that 1,000 years is, he does not go into detail on other ideas, and he did that throughout in a few other places as well. When we come to things that maybe I didn't necessarily like about this book, the only thing really that I didn't like is he does talk briefly about original sin and the idea of total depravity. Dr. Horton comes from a Calvinistic background and is unapologetically Calvinistic in his mindset. And so to see total depravity does not surprise me. However, it is one of those things that is controversial, but he did put it in here. One of the things I would tell you, though, is I would not hesitate recommending this friend to somebody that is not of the Calvinistic bend, because even when he talks about total depravity, which can actually be found if you have my edition from page 85 to 95 is where he talks about original sin and total depravity. But even as I read that section, he did not go into such detail that there was really anything I could vehemently oppose, even though I am not Calvinist. And so I would recommend, if that's something you are worried about, giving this book to a new believer or somebody trying to dig a little deeper and you are not of the Calvinistic bend, you could go to page 85 and 95 and through 95, and I'd recommend reading that just so you could see what is said. But again, I don't think you're going to find anything that you absolutely disagree with. And so I appreciated Dr. Horton not going in depth into the tulip model, which is the Calvinist idea. And so he didn't go in depth. He only talked about total depravity, that we are all born into sin and we all have a sinful nature and there's nothing we can do apart from God to be saved. And so I think as you read this book, especially that section, you would agree with what he said, even though he does come from a Calvinistic bend. Again, I would recommend this book. It's an easy read. It's 170 pages about, and it's $14.99. I'd recommend it to a new believer or somebody that's trying to grow their relationship with God, but maybe has never been introduced to those theological terms, as this is, I would say, is to be used to whet their appetite for deeper digging. So you could consider this maybe an appetizer, and then you could go into other in-depth theological books as maybe the main course. But that's essentially the overview. Again, he talks about the Trinity and the Bible, but he also goes through all the covenants. He talks about the covenant with Adam and Eve. He talks about the covenant with Moses and Abraham, all the way through to the new covenant that has been established through Christ. And so I thought he did a wonderful job of going from Genesis through Revelation, relating it all together, and also how it applies to us today. And so don't hesitate to stop by and take a look at this book. And if you have a new believer in your life or somebody you want to dig a little deeper, maybe you give this as a birthday present or a Christmas present to them.